Welcome back to What's the Point Anyway? I'm Luke, your host, and this is my conversation with Eric Yeung, a very prominent gold and silver investor and content creator out of Hong Kong. For anyone who's living in this current world and wondering what on earth is happening in the sort of financial system and economics where everything has gotten really, really weird, this is definitely an episode for you. If you enjoy it, please give the show a 5-star rating, subscribe, like, and share it with any friends that you think might get some value out of it. Hope you enjoy and chat to you next time. So I'm looking at it now, and I guess anyone looking at this recording later will see it, but it's a picture of a gorilla with a gold necklace, a crown, and a bunch of gold bars. Maybe it's a good place to start. What's the story with the avatar?
Just, like I had it for a while. It's the Silver Stacker guys. They made it for me.
Yep.
So they call themselves like the apes, right? So
Yeah.
I'm like the king of the apes. It's King Kong. That's it. It's that simple. So it's just a funny joke kind of thing, right? That evolved into what it is today. That's
Definitely.
what it is.
So, Eric, what do you do with yourself? So I've been following you for some time, and you're a very sort of highly regarded content creator and I guess commentator in the around sort of precious metals and gold, which is an area that I find truly fascinating. And what I do want to definitely get into is I think the whole precious metals and gold space, the intersection of that with sort of history, philosophy, faith, everything is a fascinating topic that I hope we can explore. But maybe just for a bit of background for everyone, what do you do with yourself? What do you do day to day?
Well, I was a contract manufacturer
Yeah.
for big box retailers for
Yeah.
a couple decades, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm pretty much retired now from that.
Yeah.
But I guess it's good timing, right? Because look at what's happening with
Exactly.
the terrorists.
Yeah.
So that's actually my expertise,
Yeah.
which is why recently, a lot of people are talking about the tariffs. They are talking about what's happening and what may actually transpire in
Yeah.
the future, right? With the Trump tariffs. And I'm participating in that
Yeah.
conversation every chance I get because
Yeah.
that's pretty much my business. That's what I did.
And you're based in Hong Kong, right?
I'm based in Hong Kong, but I had a setup in China as well.
Right.
So I
Okay.
was traveling, in Hong Kong and mainland China a
Right.
lot
Yeah.
until recently, right? So, you're in Australia, right, Luke? That's where you
Yeah.
are?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I'm Melbourne, Australia.
Yeah, so
So been to
yeah,
Hong Kong a couple of times, been to China.
great.
Know the area reasonably well. I actually, many years ago, worked for a Melbourne-based Chinese family for their sort of family office. So I know,
Wow.
which was really interesting. So gave me a great insight into the crazy world of Chinese business.
Yeah, so anyway, so you probably know China more than most people, right? But like the good news is that if Australia don't get bullied by the US into doing
Yeah,
something stupid, I think, the future is bright for Australia. I
yeah,
mean,
okay,
it's just going to
interesting.
be more business
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
between, I think China, like what the biggest trading partner of Australia right now is China.
definitely
Like I have
China.
a chart here yeah, it's China, right?
Yeah,
So like I said, looping back to what I just said, if Australia don't give in to the pressures by Donald Trump
yeah,
and the U.S. government, I think Australia is going to do well.
yeah.
That's just my opinion.
Did you
Yeah.
grow up in Hong Kong or China?
North America.
Right,
So
okay.
I grew up in I grew up in Hong Kong, like a bit, and then I moved to North America at a very young age, and then just I guess 20 years ago I moved back to
Yeah,
Hong Kong, China.
yeah. And where did the interest in gold come from?
Mainly right after the GFC,
Yeah,
like the great financial crisis.
yeah,
I
yeah,
really dug into, researching on precious metals and I got into gold.
yeah.
Like it's funny because I didn't buy like my first serious batch of gold is I bought a lot. I mean, like we're talking about a couple hundred ounces, right?
Yeah, okay.
Even back then,
Yeah,
I bought it not that cheap. Like I mean, talking about the price levels back then,
Yeah.
right? Of course, it's cheap now, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Anything that you bought in the last 10 years is cheap
Yeah. Yeah.
compared
Yeah.
to what the price is right? But yeah, I bought a whole bunch and I sat on it for a long time. And then I really added, like I by multiples in 2009,
Okay. So just
like in
before.
terms of physical gold. Yeah, just
Yeah.
before the whole fiasco, like the
Yeah.
whole COVID, whole situation there, right? I
Yeah.
bought it because of the repo crisis
Yeah.
and the Fed pivot by Powell.
Yeah.
So I saw like what he did, which is like Donald Trump gave him pressure, and then he just, from potentially increasing interest rates to at that point he started taking the interest rate to zero.
Yeah.
And I thought, hey, something wrong there, right? So
Yeah.
I really bought a lot of gold
Yeah.
in 2019. Yeah,
When you
that's
so
what happened.
when you looked at, I mean, people use, I sort of lean into the term, but some people take it as a criticism, like the whole idea of, like there's been gold bugs that have been out there, sort of, for 20, 30 years waiting for the end of the system. What, what, what were your conclusions when, like and I think the GFC, it was actually, I literally was, my last year of university, I studied finance, commerce, was 2009. So I sort of graduated right into the heart of it. But it was a period in time, I look back now in retrospect, where people started to realize that there was some serious sort of structural issues in the way that financial markets were put together. How did you conclude, like when you looked into it, what did you learn about markets and why was your conclusion that you wanted to be invested in precious metals?
Tell you the truth, my business was doing really well,
Yeah.
like around and after GFC, right? Like, I mean, if you look at the Chinese trade surplus with the world, especially
It,
the US,
it
it
went
just
mad. It's
shot way
crazy.
up. It went
Yeah.
straight up, right? Like, so
Yeah.
I was a beneficiary of that.
Yeah.
So I bought the gold, dropped a little bit, dropped I think 30%
Yeah.
from 2000. I didn't buy it at the peak. I bought it at like I think 2013, 2014,
Yeah.
2013. That's my
Yeah.
first big bet.
Yeah.
And I really just forgot about it. I mean, my main investment before 2019 was tech stocks. I
Yep.
made a lot of money. I made millions of dollars
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
tech
Yeah.
stocks,
Yeah.
and everybody did, right?
Yeah.
Anybody
Because that
who
you
who
just bought,
who really,
you bought and you
yeah,
hold, and
you
they
just
just
said
went
it.
up. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It went up, right? So, like, I mean, it didn't go up hockey stick like it did post COVID, right?
Yeah.
And after 2022, but it did go up, especially the Chinese tech stocks, which I was really heavily invested in, right?
Yeah. Like
So,
Alibaba and
yeah, like Tencent, Alibaba,
yeah.
etc. Right?
Yeah.
Alibaba wasn't public yet, but it was mainly Tencent. Anyway,
Yeah.
so the whole point is I bought the gold, I just forgot about it. Set and by vote, and I didn't really do anything about it. So to answer your question, yes, I did realize something was wrong
Yeah.
with the whole subprime situation, the
Yeah.
CDOs, etc. But because my business did so well, I just didn't think about it much.
Yeah. You
I
weren't
just
forced to
really
sort of
focused.
panic and
Yeah,
plan for the end. You were making money in business, but you said,
exactly. I was diversifying, right? I also
yeah.
bought a lot of real estate in the
Yeah.
US.
Yeah.
When that thing hit the bottom in 2012, I was actually in the US buying properties.
Yeah.
So I still own those properties, and they went up multiples, right? In terms of value.
Yeah.
But like I bought it with cash
Yeah.
in 2012 because nobody, back then post GFC, nobody would give you a mortgage.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm a foreigner, right? So they wouldn't give me a mortgage anyway.
Yeah.
So I paid in cash. I bought a whole bunch of real estate. I bought, like I said, tech stocks, and gold was part of it. I diversified, and I just forgot about it for almost a decade.
Yeah. Did
That's
you,
it.
like,
Yeah,
if you went back before that, like,
yeah.
early 2000s, did you have any idea? Did you understand gold? Did you know what gold was? What function it served, or did you really start your research into it post GFC?
Post GFC,
Yeah.
like before GFC, I think I was like like everybody, right? Like everybody else. Like, if I have a time machine
Yeah.
and travel back in time to 2002 and tell my younger self
Yeah.
that, this is going to happen,
Yeah.
I probably don't believe myself, right?
Yeah.
Because like back then, everybody was a milkshake,
Yeah.
like the milkshake guy. Hey,
Yeah.
everybody believes that the U.S. dollar is going to last forever. I mean, some
Yeah.
people still believe that, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like back then, it's probably 99.999% of the
Yeah.
people.
It had just become
You know,
such status
yeah.
quo, hadn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And like my whole focus back then was US equities and emerging markets like China
Yeah.
equities. I bought stocks back then. I mean, I bought Apple.
Yeah.
I didn't hold on to it, but I bought Apple back in 1999
Yeah.
before the tech bubble imploded.
Yeah. And
There you have it.
so I guess what I'm getting at is like with your research into precious metals in that period of time, even though you bought some and then it sort of just became back of mind as the show went on, what about this sort of shiny yellow rock became interesting in the wake of what we'd learned during the GFC? Like why would you buy gold? And I'm asking this potentially to sort of draw an answer out of you that's for the person listening to this that still may not actually know all that much about gold. They think it's interesting, but they can't quite wrap their heads around what's the investment case for it.
Well, back then it was very simple, Luke. I mean, like I didn't know as much as I do right now.
Yeah,
Didn't do the research. Like Twitter wasn't like I don't think Twitter is
yeah, I don't think it
anything
was
like
around
what
yet.
it is right now.
Yeah,
Maybe it was around, but it was a text thing, right?
yeah,
On like the old like not a smartphone, right?
yeah.
So
MySpace days.
anyway, yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah, so basically, back then my whole thought process was that the US is doing this QE thing.
yeah,
It's basically printing money. I mean, at least that's what I thought it was, right?
yeah,
Now I know the difference between QE MBS and
yeah.
QE US Treasury bonds. Fine, right? But back then, it was so new. I just thought, okay, well, they're printing this much money, so I better buy something
Yeah,
that retains value
yeah,
as a kind of like an insurance, right? So I took a little bit of money off my total net worth and I bought a whole bunch of gold,
yeah,
and that's it.
yeah.
It was as
So
simple as that.
yeah,
Yeah,
so for you, it was just basically a hedge of something.
yeah.
Hedge of something. How deep did you go? Did you go into the history of it, or did you just
I did.
know gold was sort of a hedge and that was enough for you?
You know what? I read a book written by Jim Rickers
Yep.
back then.
Yeah.
I mean, he was like, I know that Mike Maloney existed even back then, but I didn't really, watch any of his videos back then, all the way back then. But I did read the Currency Wars by Jim Rickers.
Yep.
So I read that. I saw the QE, and I thought, oh, okay, buy some gold.
Yep.
It's that simple.
Yeah.
I mean, back then things were simpler, right,
Yeah.
than today.
Yeah. So what have you learned? What have you learned in the last 15 years, and how is your understanding of sort of gold and precious metals in lieu of the world that we're living in now evolved and developed over time?
Well, not obviously, right?
Yeah.
You look at my X accounts, and it's just something new every day, right? But like, I mean, the bottom line, I think, is that the world is trying to diversify away from the US dollar
Yeah.
and US Treasury bonds.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say completely give it up
Yeah.
because then we'll see violent reactions in the market, right?
Yeah.
Outsized reactions in the market right now, but
Hmm.
not to the point of complete implosion
Yeah.
of the market, right? So what that tells me is that yes, the world is moving away from the US dollar and US treasuries, but they're not completely giving it up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Since it's still, like the existing system, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think what's happening and the facts actually, support my thesis is that physical gold is increasingly becoming a replacement
Mm-hmm.
to the U.S. Treasury bonds as a alternative global neutral reserve asset.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the main
Yeah.
of what is happening right now, and everything else revolves around this
Yeah.
concept.
And where do you sit within the gold community? There's varying scales of. I think anyone that's a gold sort of fanatic doesn't trust sort of the mainstream position. So as a starter, so I think anyone that's into gold is skeptical of mainstream. But then I find that the people in the community sort of range from a little bit skeptical to full blown sort of conspiracy, and I don't even say conspiracy theorists as a negative word, but basically of the view that the everything is sort of a conspiracy and there's all different sort of games going on. Where do you sit on that? You seem to be fairly level headed on it.
I don't take everything. I try not to go like full conspiracy theory. Like
Yeah,
some people say Fort Knox is empty.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I don't think that.
yeah,
I think they do have to go.
yeah,
Maybe they were short, you know, I'm talking about all four of the vaults that the US government keep their physical gold in, right? Denver,
yeah.
Fort Knox, the New York Fed, and what is it? The forgot the last one.
Whatever the fourth one.
Well, it's Fort Knox, Denver, New York Fed, and West Point,
Yeah,
Florida.
yeah,
West Point, right? So anyway, so all four of these vaults combined, probably they were missing a couple thousand metric tons.
yeah.
But look at what happened in the last couple of months.
Yeah, bought a whole lot back.
2,000 metric tons plus flowed into
Yeah,
the US, right?
yeah,
And probably more by now, probably around 3,000.
yeah,
So, my belief is that they probably do have to go.
yeah,
It's just a matter of time before they pull the trigger and revalue the gold that the U.S. Treasury, has on its balance sheet, which is
yeah,
8,133 metric tons. Right
yeah.
now, it's valued at 42.22, I believe, right?
Per
U.S.
ounce.
dollars
Yeah,
per troy ounce.
yeah,
Correct.
yeah. So that needs to multiply by at least a factor of 15 or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something like that.
So what's your view on who the various factions are? Like when we talk US, and I think we've lived, particularly in sort of post 1971, we've lived in a US dollar dominated financial system. And then you've got the whole euro dollar market where there's US dollars sort of being created in offshore markets. And this system has served I think it's served a lot of factions, and it's been, but it's come to the end of its natural life. My position sort of at this point in time is that to me, it seems like, and this is why I think things have just got really weird post GFC, that we're coming towards the end of a system that always had an end date, and now you have different factions sort of jostling over who's going to have the power in whatever spills out of it, which is why you sort of have deals being made and it looks like there's alliances, and then and then the alliances quickly change. Like when you talk US, do you think the US has been acting in its own interest? Or when you talk US, are we thinking about sort of a more sort of global sort of cabal that have been sort of controlling things using the US as its proxy?
I know some people think, the U.S. is completely controlled by, foreign countries.
Yeah,
Maybe like some people say Davos,
yeah,
which is, the Europeans.
yeah,
Some people say it's the banking cartel.
yeah,
And some people say it's Israel, right?
yeah,
That controls, Washington, D.C.
yeah,
Yeah, it's probably a mix
yeah,
of, like, the truth is never, like, I find the singular
yeah,
reason.
yeah. There's a lot. There's a
It's
little
a
bit of
lot more
this, a bit of
complex.
that. Agreed.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Yeah,
a lot more complex, right? So,
yeah,
that's my belief. I think it's a complex, situation that is going on. But you look at Donald Trump getting into power
Yeah.
and what he's trying to do. Well, somebody is definitely trying to, do something different
Yeah.
versus what the, globalization crowd
Yeah.
has been doing for the last, what, like 60 years?
Yeah. 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 It seems we've hit like the end of that hardcore sort of open borders globalization because
Correct.
I think that to me it seems like the sort of societal impact of that was reaching a tipping point where you couldn't just keep gutting the middle class from all these countries, or they were going to just lose control of them.
Yeah. I mean, like, that's one narrative. But another observation that somebody made is that during this, the initial phases of this transition,
Yeah,
the ultra wealthy got even wealthier,
yeah,
a lot wealthier,
yeah,
right? So wouldn't that speed up that process you're talking about?
yeah,
Make it worse, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
that's interesting. So is it like purely a planned transition, or is it a bunch of guys, who are using this so-called planned transition as an excuse to make more money off the masses
Yeah, yeah,
during the confusion?
yeah. Yeah, it's sort of
See what I'm getting at? Yes.
definitely it's it's almost like I don't know, like the end of a board game or the end of a game where you've had a lot of the key players. There's been a set of rules and it's worked, and you could just play by those rules. And if you knew how the game worked, you could do very well for yourself. But it's almost like the last few years, it's like the rules have gone out the door and now it's just become sort of vicious at the top. So, like, yeah, as markets have sort of imploded and then completely reinflated post COVID, it's like everyone's just run and rushed and grabbed to get as much as they can before it all sort of starts over.
Yeah. It looks like that's what's happening right now. That's a very good description
Yeah.
of
And
what's
so
happening.
what's your I'm interested to hear your perspective from someone that's sort of, based in Hong Kong and China. Because again, I've sort of heard different theories that, that China has essentially just been used by the Davos crowd to to further their own sort of wealth interests, and that, it'll be cast aside whenever they don't need it anymore. How sovereign do you think China has been over the last decade or so? Are they really now a global power that's calling their own shots, or do you think China is controlled by sort of global interests?
I mean, if China is completely controlled by the so-called neo-colonial global interest,
Yeah.
look at Africa.
Yeah.
Does
Yeah.
Africa, or even look at India, right? Look at
Yeah.
Africa and India. Do they have the kind of, first-rate infrastructure that China has?
Absolutely
I
not.
don't think so, right? Because you visited China,
Yeah.
I don't know if you visited recently, but if you go to like the coastal cities in China, it's
Yeah.
almost like visiting the future.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's how
Yeah.
crazy it is. And look at Chinese industries;
Mm.
they're all vertically integrated.
Yeah.
I mean, I just recently shared the fact sheet from Trading Economics to my followers, and on that list it has a whole bunch of items that China is currently exporting to the
Mhm.
US. I did that because like a lot of people in the US, I don't know, they might be busy, they might be lazy, they might be ignorant, I don't know, but they keep telling me China only export mixed like cheap plastic wrap.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
That's
It's just
that's the most common line,
yeah.
right? Like I mean the person who doesn't know better, who
Yeah.
don't know better, that's what they say,
Yeah.
right? So let me just read it off to you, okay?
Yeah.
Right now. So the top items, this is for 2023. 124.5 billion US dollars, electrical and electronic equipment.
Yeah.
$89 billion, machinery, nuclear reactors and boilers.
Mm.
30.1 billion, furniture, lighting signs, buildings. Like they actually make like sections of buildings and you
Yeah.
ship it off.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about, right? Like
It was so
now,
the family I used to work for,
yes.
basically one of they so you probably know it. See,
Okay. Yeah.
so I think they manufacture half the world's shipping containers, and they were also, I think, set up a division that's the biggest modular building company in the world as well.
Yeah. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Modular building. So
Yeah.
that's the term, right? Perfect.
Yeah.
And then 30 billion, that's toy games, sports, equipment.
Yeah.
That's number 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Number 4. Number 5 is plastics, 23 billion.
Yeah.
So the top 3 are, what we call first world advanced manufactured products, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't see Africa or Mexico manufacturing nuclear reactors, do you?
Nah, no.
Right? Like, that's pretty high end, right? So, and then there's a whole bunch of other stuff like vehicles, iron, steel, clothing, commodities, looking down the list,
Yeah.
footwear, organic chemicals, so you name it, it's on it.
I mean, even
But my point being, yeah.
like,
Oh, sorry, go
I
ahead.
mean, anecdotally, because this will tie into it. I'm a groomsman for a wedding in a month's time, and my friend organised tailored suits for all of the groomsmen, and he's organised it for basically probably a company that's the best sort of tailored suit brand in Australia. And I was chatting to the guy there who's the tailor, and all of their suits now get made in China, and these are like high end $2,000-$3,000 suits. They're not made
It
in Italy.
totally makes sense.
Not made in
Yeah.
Italy or Australia anymore. Like, they're made in China. Whereas, I don't know, 10 years ago, it would have been like, yeah, you get a cheap suit from China, but if you want a really nice suit, you go to Europe. It's just not the case.
Totally makes sense. My friend is a tailor, and
Yeah.
that's what they do as well, right? I
Yeah.
mean, they do the stuff in Hong Kong, the really, really high end stuff, but
Yeah.
for the lower end stuff, they do the measurements in Hong Kong,
Yeah.
and then they ship off the measurements to China,
Yeah.
and the Chinese tailor makes it and then ship it back to Hong Kong.
Yeah.
That's how it works, right? So completely normal, right? Everybody wants to make money.
Yeah.
If the Chinese tailors can make it at, let's say, 90%, the quality that the Italian tailor makes it at, right? Why not?
Yeah.
People want to make money.
Yeah.
That's the way I see it. So
Yeah.
that's a good observation, Luke.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Pleasure. And so, what do you so with the gold revaluation that you touched on before? Who do you think, obviously the US has a lot, you think it has a lot of gold. I would agree. I don't think the vaults are empty. I think they've got lots, and whatever they do have, we've seen a huge influx of gold additionally come in just this year. China obviously have an enormous bank of gold. Russia, I think the same. Like, all of these key sort of powers in whatever this new, I'll call it New World Order, not to just sort of use the conspiratorial term, but essentially I think what we're seeing is some new order of doing things emerging. All the key players seem to have accumulated a significant amount of gold to sort of to establish themselves in the realignment of things. Are they all in the same situation in that they're incentivized to have a much higher gold price to sort out the sovereign debt issues?
Well, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
look at what's happening right now. The U.S. You're talking about sovereign debt, right? Let's look at the U.S. Almost 37 trillion U.S. dollars
Yeah.
worth of national debt. That's the U.S. Treasury bonds that are out there right now
Yeah.
that they have to pay back, right? Around 8 trillion of that is foreign held.
Yeah.
Let's say gold gets to, I don't know, uh, $4,000.
Yeah.
Let's say, right? So we did some calculations. I think that's around $1 trillion worth
Yeah.
of the U.S. held gold
Yeah.
at 8,133 metric tons.
Yeah.
So that would do what? 1/8.
Yeah.
That's 12.5%, right?
Yeah.
The foreign held U.S. Treasury debt.
Yeah.
What if they take that number to 8,000
Yeah.
US
Gets to
dollars?
a quarter.
So that would be 20%, right?
Yeah.
And what if they take it to, let's say, $20,000? That's, almost 40%,
Yeah.
40-50%. And
Yeah.
at 40-50%, a lot of problems will just melt away.
Mm.
Do you see that? And Luke Roman, Luke, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Very famous guy, right? He
Yeah.
recently said that if gold is at $20,000, China doesn't have a trade surplus anymore.
Yeah.
The world would have, trade equilibrium, especially for a country like Australia, because you guys produce so much gold.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So the entire world, the trade imbalances will sort of melt away
Yeah.
if gold is at $20,000 per troy ounce.
Yeah.
Now, are the central banks going to take it there? With a sudden gold revaluation? I don't believe so.
You
I
don't.
think
You don't. But you don't think so?
I don't believe
because
so.
that's
Because if they do that, you know what's going to happen, Luke? The physical gold flows are going to be imbalanced
yeah.
if they do a sudden revaluation.
Yeah.
Because what that means is that the U.S. government will have to be ready to buy back any physical gold that flows back to the U.S.
Yeah.
Unless the U.S. government put huge tariffs on physical gold.
Yeah.
Which wouldn't work because gold is money.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? You don't tariff money, right? So I don't believe that's going to happen. So what I do think is going to happen is what people like Judy Shelton are saying.
Yeah.
The U.S. government is going to revalue the U.S. Treasury held 8,133 metric tons physical gold.
Yeah.
At mark-to-market.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, I think what's going to happen is that the market is going to revalue physical gold.
Yeah.
For all these central banks.
Yeah.
And we got a little taste of that recently, right?
Yeah.
It went up like $100 a day, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't, if physical gold is going up $100 per day, it wouldn't take that long.
No.
For gold to get to $10,000, right?
Yeah.
So people say, well, 20,000. Let's get to, first let's get beyond $4,000 first, right?
Yeah.
Let's go to $4,000 first, and then see how quickly it'll get to like 6,000 or 10,000.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at.
Yeah.
With my thinking. Yes.
So the US government obviously has a significant amount of foreign held debt. And as we've touched on, a lot of the other key countries do as well. Who doesn't want a significantly higher gold price? Because it's like the old
nobody. Nobody.
It's like the old Charlie Munger quote, isn't it? It's like, you show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. Well, if the incentive to clear your debts is basically to not go through any particular hardship yourself and revalue what's already on your balance sheet, and the only thing that you can do that with is gold, then it makes sense that they're all interested in a higher gold price.
Absolutely. I mean, silver is another, is a totally different ballgame, right? Silver is an industrial metal.
Yeah.
And it hits the bottom line of countries that uses silver to manufacture stuff, right? But for gold, it's not used for anything.
Yeah.
Like, on a industrial scale, right?
Yeah.
So again, I look back to what Luke Roman said recently in his podcast, and he's right. Like, gold is the prime candidate to go up in US dollar terms to solve a lot of these problems that we're talking about here, right? So I do believe that this physical gold revaluation is going to come sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
Because the later it comes, the more damage.
Yeah.
It's going to do to the world economy.
Yeah.
The more damage it is going to do to the US, right? So I think they are on a tight time schedule. Judy Shelton suggested, July 2026.
Yeah.
So that's just like a year away, pretty much.
Yeah.
There's not much time.
July 26th that they announce a mark-to-market change in the pricing of it?
Well, no, she's talking about July 4th.
Yeah.
Which is the 4th of July, right? Like the
Independence Day.
Independence Day, right?
Yeah.
So she's talking about the issuance or the launch of the U.S. Treasury physical gold bonds.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what she's talking about. But the prerequisite of that is to revalue the US Treasury physical gold maximum.
And what do you
So
think?
that's why I say that July time frame.
What
Go ahead.
what does something like that do for things like inflation and the value of people that?
Well, inflation, I think this is a monetary revaluation
Yeah,
against physical gold. So I don't think it has much to do with directly with inflation per se.
yeah,
Why do I say that? Well, who has the biggest concentrated physical gold positions in the world? Concentrated. The central bank.
central banks. Yeah,
Are they going to start spending the gold into like circulation? No.
no,
They're just going to hold it on their balance sheets, right?
yeah,
That's the trick they use, right?
as an accounting transaction.
It's an accounting
Yeah,
transaction, exactly, right? But people own gold, yeah, sure, a lot of gold, but not per individual per
no,
se.
no,
Like there might be some gold bugs, sure, but we are like the minority of the minority,
yeah,
even more rare than the crypto guys, right? There are
yeah,
more crypto people than gold bugs. So I
definitely.
don't think that will cause a lot of inflation, but
Yeah,
the tariffs situation will definitely cause inflation
yeah,
to the trade deficit nations. That's what I believe.
yeah,
So, like for the trade deficit nations, like what I mean is, if you're a country that don't really manufacture a lot of items,
hmm,
you depend on imports, right?
yeah,
Then you're going to see a lot of inflation
yeah,
if your government slap tariffs on everybody.
yeah,
I mean, that's just the definition of
yeah,
inflation, right?
yeah,
On the other hand, if you're a nation that depends on exports, you export a lot of stuff. You're a manufacturing powerhouse, right?
yeah,
Okay, and you all of a sudden you lose 14.8% of your customer base,
mm,
which is exactly what's happening to China because China export out of all of China's exports, 14.8% goes to the US.
yeah,
Let's just say you lose all of it, but let's face it, they're not going to lose all of it
yeah, yeah,
overnight.
yeah,
Let's say half of that, so 7%, right?
yeah.
So China is going to experience some deflation.
Deflation, yeah. It's like, yeah,
Deflation.
if
So
you're
that's
if you're a company that
yeah,
loses your biggest customer, it's a deflationary move for you.
exactly. So
Yeah,
I mean, this is nothing new. It
yeah,
happened in the 1930s
yeah,
when the U.S. government started, tightening up its monetary base, right? The Great Depression happened. That was a deflationary event
yeah,
in the U.S. Remember it, the U.S. erected a whole bunch of tariffs,
yeah.
towards the European imports, right? So the European countries, what happened? They experienced a whole bunch of inflation
Inflation, yeah,
because back then the U.S. was the biggest manufacturer in the world,
yeah,
especially after World War One.
yeah,
After Europe's manufacturing was devastated by war,
mm,
right? So this time is kind of like the U.S. is in the same shoes as Europe,
yeah.
and China is in the same shoes as the U.S. was
As US back then,
back in the 1930s, right? So
yeah,
that's what I see, and it's not rocket science. Let's see if I'm correct. It's
yeah,
already happening,
yeah,
really,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like, I mean, China, I see the deflation that is happening in China right now as we speak. And I think the inflation in the US is already happening.
yeah. So when you mentioned just before how you asked the question who holds the most concentrated sort of holdings of gold, and it's clearly the central banks, and then it's a handful of gold bugs. I had an interesting conversation on the weekend with a close friend of mine who works in wealth management, and I basically made the same point to him that the only people that really own gold are central banks and lunatic gold bugs like us, right? And
Right.
and he said, well, no, he said all of my clients own gold and they've got 5 to 10% allocation into gold, and I think you probably can guess where this is going. I said, yes, but do they own the physical gold? He said, "Oh, no, no, of course not. They own it in funds like GLD." So what do you think happens with these gold funds over the next period of time? And what's your assessment on those?
Well, first of all, your friend is Australian, right?
Yeah,
Correct? This is Australian fund, so
correct.
that's not the norm worldwide,
Yeah,
and especially not the US. The US, I believe, is less than 1%
right.
allocation
Yeah,
into, even gold funds, okay?
yeah,
Like GLD.
yeah,
So it's underowned, underallocated
yeah,
in the US. And I believe Hong Kong as well. China, there's a frenzy right now of people trying to get into gold. So, the gold funds are doing well. So that's an exceptional case. But if you ask me, I think if Australians are buying GLD, sure, they're getting paper exposure into to physical gold.
yeah,
But you got to remember how GLD works, right? GLD, I call it a piggy bank, physical gold piggy bank for the banking cartel,
yeah,
for the bullion banks. Why do I say that? Because the bullion banks, they are the authorized participants of GLD. They can borrow GLD shares
mm,
to redeem gold, physical gold.
yeah,
You see how that works?
yeah,
So if they don't have enough physical gold elsewhere, they can, or they want to trade arbitrage, right?
yeah,
They can go to GLD, they can borrow shares, from people,
yeah,
and then they can redeem those shares with physical gold, effectively sucking out the physical gold from
yeah,
GLD. That's why, I was tracking GLD in the beginning of the year. That's why you see like all this, gold influx into the US. And GLD's physical gold vault levels didn't really move. It was
yeah, right.
around, I think, 800 metric tons.
Yeah,
Like it between 8 to 900. It didn't really move that much
yeah,
because every time, it added a little bit of gold, the APs just sucked it right out.
mm, yeah,
You see, so if you're fine with that as a GLD investor, all the power to you.
yeah. But you lose the biggest selling point I think that gold has is that it's a independent asset that sits outside the system.
My position with that is that if you don't hold the physical gold, why even buy GLD? It doesn't make
Yeah,
any sense, like you said, right? Like
yeah,
because the whole point of physical gold is that you want that physical asset outside of the system
yeah,
that you can keep yourself.
yeah,
That's it.
definitely. So, Eric, I'd love to segue a little bit into this sort of intersection of the gold market and understand, the things we've spoken about, how gold helps us to understand incentives and how the world works and how the world of finance works, into how that's impacted your worldview. So, how did I saw last week you put up a post about Easter, so I think you're Christian. So how do you see the world? What's your outlook on things? What's your sort of philosophy for living and life?
Well, I think I see this a lot on my X channel. I think it's everybody's responsibility to take care of their own finances
Yeah,
and to protect their own wealth.
yeah,
So you don't go out and start blaming other people
yeah,
or, you know, I mean, you can blame the government because they're definitely trying to screw us, but in a sense, you can protect your own self, right? If you
yeah,
make the right decisions. That's
yeah,
that's my point.
yeah. It's a
So
cro- it,
I'm really focused.
it's
Yeah.
a crooked system, but you don't just blame the system and sort of wallow in your mire a bit. Take control of your own circumstances within that, is what you're saying.
Yes, correct.
Yeah,
So I'm really focused on that, and I try to educate people
yeah,
on what's actually happening because there's so many false narratives out there
mm,
that it's just a lot of these people are. Some of them may be government agents.
yeah,
Some of them, may have some sort of motive because they run a subscription service. I don't
Yeah.
know, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure you know this, Luke. You look out there, there's just a lot of stuff that doesn't make any sense.
100%. Yeah.
Like the stuff that they say, right? Like I don't know if you remember, but for the longest time, a lot of these people are saying that the US is in deflation.
Yeah.
I mean, come on,
Yeah.
right? No, I don't think the US has ever been in deflation since the GFC.
Yeah.
Maybe this inflation for a couple of years, but mainly inflation.
Yeah.
And, I think ongoing that inflation is really going to kick in.
Yeah.
Now, is it going to show up in the numbers? I don't know because of the way that they calculate CPI, right? They take everything out,
Yeah. Yeah.
essentially.
And
So I don't know.
if
Yeah,
something rises too much in price, they pull that out. If something's falling in price, they quickly add that to the basket.
exactly. So
Yeah.
is it going to reflect that? I don't know, right? Like, so
Yeah.
for example, give an example, Adidas came out yesterday and said that they're going to start increasing prices
Yeah.
on the sneakers in the US. It makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I bought a pair of sneakers, Adidas sneakers in Europe, and it was 100 Hong Kong dollars. So that's like, 20 Australian dollars
Yeah.
more expensive than the same pair of shoes in Hong Kong.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that makes sense because in Hong Kong right now is flooded with stuff that can't make it to the US
Yeah.
because of the tariffs, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
They need to get rid of it.
yeah, so they're getting rid of it in Hong Kong, right? So Hong Kong, we have if you shop right now in Hong Kong, you're in luck, right? Because a lot of this stuff, 30% off.
Yeah.
Okay. Ongoing, what's going to happen to these shoes in the US? It's going to double in price,
Yeah.
more than double. I mean, that's insane. So are they going to report that in CPI numbers? Who knows?
Yeah.
You see how much of a joke CPI is?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Doesn't tell you anything,
Yeah.
right? So that's my point there, right? But I guess it will help go because if they don't include anything of importance in the CPI,
Yeah.
and they only include mostly the domestic produced products, CPI may actually be flat or go down, right? Which gives Powell an excuse to cut rates.
Yeah. Yeah. Where do you
See
think?
how funny that is?
Where do you think rates go? You think rates go down, and then how does that work in a world where US Treasury bonds, which essentially the price of bonds equals the price of money and the price of rates? Like how do you have lower rates in a world where they increasingly can't sell treasuries to people and therefore have to discount them?
Yeah. So this is my understanding of the situation, right?
Yeah.
And 4 to 5% interest rate for U.S. Treasury bonds, T-bills, etc.
Yeah.
The U.S. government is now paying around $1 trillion a year
Yeah.
to service its debt
Yeah.
of $37 trillion, right? And by the way, that's going to only increase.
Correct. Yeah.
Because let's say if they curb their spending, it's not going to go to zero, right?
No.
You see what I'm saying? So they might
Yeah.
decrease the speed of increase, but
Yeah.
it's still going to increase.
Yeah. And
So
you got
trillion plus a year.
interest on debt keeps getting added. So
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Interest on debt, right?
Yeah.
So they're paying $1 trillion interest on debt.
Yeah.
And increasing per
Yeah.
year, right? So, people like Judy Shelton, they're brilliant, by the way. She said one way to alleviate the situation, and she's really talking about pushing more people into long-term U.S. Treasury bonds versus T-bills.
Yeah.
You do see why they want to do that,
Yeah,
right? These
of course.
T-bills, you got to pay off not only the $1 trillion per year,
You
you
gotta pay back the
also need to
principal.
find new buyers, right?
Yeah,
Because you
yeah.
got to pay back the principal too, right? That's a big freaking problem, right? So,
Yeah.
that's one of the biggest concerns is to get people to buy more long-term U.S. Treasury bonds,
Yeah.
okay, versus the T-bills. So she said, okay, one way to do it is to just cut rates.
Yeah.
Because the Federal Reserve Fed funds rate, that essentially is the T-bill rate.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? That's not
Yeah.
the long-term rate. That's the T-bill rate, right?
Yeah.
So they cut rates, that's going to affect the T-bill rate. That's going to push that down, which means it incentivizes, theoretically, right? It incentivizes U.S. Treasury buyers into the long duration.
Yeah.
That's the logic there, right?
Yeah.
But going back to what you said, does it solve the overall problem of lessening U.S. Treasury, bonds and T-bills, etc., appetite from foreign buyers? I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think it's just deferring the problem
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
down the road.
Yeah. So what do you think's ahead, like culturally and as far as society goes? So, we've spoken about sort of the jostling of central banks and the accounting, the accounting transactions they might do, and tariffs and how that's changing sort of inflation and deflation. What's your prospect for the world over the next decade or two? Does it get worse, or does it get better? Are you optimistic for the future, or do you find it hard not to be pessimistic?
Pretty optimistic, Luke.
Yeah.
I think, if the governments of the world don't screw it up badly, I think eventually things are going to realign. What I mean by that is, the US, they're trying to reshore
Yeah.
all this manner. They will have some success. That's my belief in
Yeah.
certain products, especially the high-end products.
Yeah.
That's what Scott Bessent came out and said recently. He said
Mhm.
that Trump and himself want to really get the high-end, the high-value manufacturing back to the US. I
Yeah.
believe they will have some success with that.
Yeah.
It's an interesting statement because the whole promise that Trump and Bessent gave to, especially Trump, gave to their constituents is that they will bring back a lot of jobs for the regular Joe, right?
Yeah.
For the regular Joe American. But if you're only talking about the high end stuff like microprocessor or semiconductor manufacturing,
Yeah.
that's kind of like, that doesn't benefit the regular Joe
No, not at all.
now, would it? Right? So they always contradicting themselves, right? So
Yeah.
that's one thing I noticed, right? But I think they'll have some success with the high end stuff. Because
Yeah.
I know for a fact that some high end strategic manufacturing already moved back to the US.
Yeah.
Those guys are having some success. So
Yeah.
I know that for a fact because I'm in the industry, right?
Yeah.
In terms of China, people say, well, like China is going to be screwed. A lot of people are going to be unemployed, etc. Let's put it this way. Scott Bessent, he said what? He said 10 million Chinese people are going to be unemployed due to lose their jobs due to these terrorists, right?
Yeah.
He said it yesterday, I believe.
Yeah.
So let's say that's correct. China has 1.4 billion people. He's talking about 10 million.
Yeah.
Think about that.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a percentage, right? It's a percentage, right?
A small relative number.
Okay, and it's not a set number, it's dynamic.
Mm.
What I mean is, it takes a bit of time and then that manpower is going to be reallocated to
Yeah.
other areas. And people say, what about all these factories? Well, was in the manufacturing business. I tell you, like a lot of these factories are dead wood.
Yeah.
They overextended.
Yeah.
You work for one of the top guys in China, you told me, right?
Yeah.
Container manufacturing. There are tons
Yeah.
and tons of people who are unqualified,
Yeah.
right? Okay, who are barely qualified. Because in the past, especially in the past 10 years, the world demanded so much cheap manufactured products from China.
Yeah.
So all these factories sprung up, that some of them unqualified in terms of the actual manufacturing side. Some of them may make very good products, but they are barely qualified financially.
Yeah.
Okay. So I see this as just a reshuffling.
Yeah.
The dead wood has to be burned off. And once this process is done, I believe China will do well.
Yeah.
That's what I think will happen. Do you
Yeah.
agree? I mean, you worked with a Chinese company yourself.
Yeah.
Tell me.
I think so. I was I mean, one of the main reasons I got into it is that I was bullish. I was bullish on China, and I was. I mean, when did I go over there? I was there in 2018, 2019. I mean, it's a phenomenal place, like utterly phenomenal and advanced. I think you touched on that at the start. So it's like I find it hard to see a world where it all just blows up for China. It's built. I hadn't really considered it, but when you touched on it before, it's so I haven't spent time in Africa, but I know enough about it that it's it's comparing apples with oranges. Like this is a place that's advanced. It's not a place that's just had factories set up sucking its cheap labor and then it's going to be left out to dry. Like it's a well and truly established country. So yeah, I'd agree with
Exactly.
it. Yeah, I'd agree
Yeah.
with that. I'm still unsure about what on earth the next decade looks like. I think the reshuffling of the deck chairs and the realignment of things is going to be pretty painful for a period of time. I lean towards the idea that the world's and I haven't always been this way. I don't think it's as conspiratorial as I once believed. I think there's a lot more chaos than we give it credit for, which is why I don't I don't subscribe to this idea that this is just some long drawn out plan to move the whole world to a bunch of sort of serfs that are going to be in this Agenda 2030 system. I think a lot of these ideas are sort of pipe dreams for globalists, but the actual implementation of it is near impossible, and they're just repeating the same attempts that have been made over and over through history from sort of ruling powers that have tried to overextend their powers and sort of fallen on their sword in the process of doing it.
I just think, Luke, I just think at the end of the day, I think China is going to adapt
Yeah,
and move on.
yeah,
And to a certain extent, the same with the US.
yeah,
US situation is a lot more volatile because Donald Trump got, what, 3.5 years left of his
yeah,
term.
yeah,
So let's say he finishes, who's the next guy? Next guy, right?
yeah,
What's the next guy going to do? Who knows?
yeah,
So I think the US situation is a lot more volatile. Like I said, I think they will achieve some success in terms of reshoring.
yeah,
So that's my base case.
yeah,
Um, I try not to assume the worst.
yeah,
So the worst is another world war
yeah,
or war spreading all
yeah,
over the world, right?
yeah.
That's pretty much it.
Perfect. Well, Eric, I've really appreciated the chat, and it's been good, really good to bring you on and bring a different perspective, not just from someone who's based in a different part of the world, but someone with sort of the depth of knowledge on financial markets and other things like you are. So I love that takeaway that you had of sort of people sort of seeing things as are and trying to control their own destiny. Any final pieces of advice, or I mean, the name of the show is "What's the Point Anyway?" I actually usually ask that question at the start, but maybe I'll ask it at the end. Any thoughts in addition to sort of taking control of your own destiny around the question, "What's the point of our existence anyway?"
Yeah, well, I think my last word on your show is, just tell people if they don't own any physical gold and silver right now, they should go out and buy some.
Yeah,
Just buy some physical gold and silver.
yeah,
Just so that you're ahead. You're slightly ahead.
yeah,
Anything is better than nothing. I always tell people, big things start from small beginnings.
yeah.
So you got to start somewhere.
Perfect. Good advice. And I would reiterate to that. It's funny the amount of, I mean, I've been banging on about gold to everyone in my sort of circle for a good 4 or 5 years now. And I'm disappointed at the amount of people that just haven't followed it up and gone and done it. And people seem to think that owning gold or buying gold is such a difficult thing to do. But whether you're in Hong Kong, Australia, or America, it's ridiculously easy, isn't it? You just literally walk into the local sort of gold dealer, buy some gold, and it's yours.
Yep. I
Yep.
mean, I'm playing with my gold bracelet right now
Yep.
while I'm talking to you. So it's that easy. There you go. There you go.
Perfect, Derek. Well, thanks so much for the chat. I look forward to continuing to follow you and your commentaries. I'll point people to your X account. Was it at King Kong 9888?
Correct. King Kong 9888 on X.
Perfect. Where you are, I guess, a leading sort of figure in the industry with lots of awesome thoughts, and you post very, very regularly. So anyone listening that wants to learn more, go check out Eric's stuff, and I look forward to following it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Luke. Thank you.